I was lying on a gurney with blood pooling somewhere inside my abdomen, and my mother was telling me I was being dramatic. The accident happened at 2:47 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. A pickup truck ran a red light and hit my driver's side door at nearly 40 miles per hour. I remember the sound more than anything, not even the impact, just the sound. Then the airbag. Then nothing for a few seconds. When I came back to myself, I was tilted sideways. My car had been pushed halfway onto the sidewalk, and someone outside was already on the phone with 911. My girls were not with me. Thank God for that. Mia was 5, Lily was 3, and they were still at daycare. I had 20 minutes before pickup. That was the first thing I thought about, even before the pain registered properly. Who is going to get my girls? My husband, Daniel, was 3 states away for work. I called him first, hands shaking, voice steadier than it had any right to be. He said he was booking a flight immediately. But the earliest he could get home was the following morning. The paramedics were already at my window. I needed someone to pick up my daughters in the next 15 minutes, and then, depending on what was happening inside my body, potentially keep them for days. I called my mother. She picked up on the second ring. I could hear the television in the background, some afternoon talk show. Mom! My voice cracked on just that one word. I've been in an accident. I'm being taken to St. Matthew's. I need someone to get Mia and Lily from Hartwell Daycare. Please. Right now? There was a pause, not a stunned pause, a considering pause. Like she was weighing something on a scale only she could see. How bad is it? She asked. I don't know yet. They think there might be internal bleeding. Mom, I need someone to get the girls. The pickup closes at 5:30. Another pause. Then she said, and I want to be very careful here about the exact words, because I have replayed them more times than I can count. She said, you've always done this. Something is always happening with you. You've always needed something from everybody. I thought I'd misheard her. My ears were still ringing from the airbag. What? We have the Harry Styles concert tonight. Your father and I and Rachel have been planning this for months. You know that. I looked out through my cracked windshield at the paramedic crouching beside my door. He was young. He had kind eyes. He was watching me with the particular expression of someone who can tell that whatever is happening on the other end of that phone call is worse than the car accident. Mom, I am in an ambulance. My daughters need to be picked up in 15 minutes. Call a neighbor, she said, or one of your daycare friends. You always make everything so dramatic. You've been doing it since you were a teenager. The world doesn't stop because something happens to you. I heard my sister Rachel's voice in the background, asking what was going on. My mother told her, it's your sister. Car accident. You know how she is. Then she said goodbye and hung up. The paramedic asked me if I needed a moment. I told him no. I scrolled through my contacts with a hand I couldn't quite feel, blood pressure dropping, and I found the one person I hadn't wanted to burden. The one person who had always shown up. Grandpa, he answered before the second ring finished. I said 4 words. I need your help, he replied. Tell me where. Stay with me, because what happened over the next 2 weeks changed everything. And what happened after that? My parents never saw it coming. While I was in surgery, a 3-hour procedure to stop bleeding from a ruptured spleen, Grandpa, my father's 71-year-old father, drove 40 minutes across the city, picked up Mia and Lily, took them to his house, fed them macaroni and cheese, gave them baths, and put them to bed in the guest room with a nightlight he bought at a gas station on the way home. My parents went to the Harry Styles concert. I know this because Rachel posted about it. 6 Instagram stories, matching sequined outfits, foam hands. My mother with her eyes closed and arms raised during one of the slow songs, looking so gloriously, perfectly free. I saw those stories from the ICU the next morning, tubes in my arm, lying very still because movement hurt in a way I didn't have language for yet. My nurse noticed what I was looking at and quietly took the phone out of my hand and set it face down on the bedside table. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Here's the thing about my family that took me 34 years to name clearly. There has always been a hierarchy, and I have always been at the bottom of it. Rachel is the youngest. She is 4 years behind me, and she arrived into our family like a second chance at something my parents didn't know they'd been wanting. She was easier. She was sunnier. She was better at performing the version of herself that made my parents feel like good parents. I don't blame Rachel for this, or at least, I've worked hard to get to a place where I don't. She didn't design the system. She just benefited from it. I was the difficult one. I asked too many questions. I had opinions that didn't align with my parents' opinions. When I was 14 and told my mother that the way my father spoke to her sometimes seemed unkind, she told me I had a problem with authority and sent me to my room. When I was 19 and chose a nursing program over the business degree my father wanted, he didn't speak to me for 3 months. But here's what they never tell you about being the difficult one. You also become the useful one. Because when you've spent your whole life trying to earn your place, you learn to be capable. And capability, in a family like mine, is a resource to be extracted. I helped put Rachel through her last 2 years of college when my parents said they were short. I gave them money for the roof repair they claimed they couldn't afford. $1,200 I didn't really have, paid in 2 installments. I drove my mother to every single one of her cardiology appointments for 8 months after her heart scare because Rachel was too busy and my father didn't do well in medical settings. I never asked to be repaid. I never kept a ledger. That was my mistake, not the giving, but the assumption that it was building something, that all of it was proof of love and not just proof of availability. 3 years before the accident, Daniel's mother, his real mother, not a stepmother, his actual mother who raised him, died of cancer. We were devastated. We flew down for the service. We were gone 4 days. My parents did not check in once. Not a text, not a missed call, nothing. When I mentioned it, weeks later, careful and quiet, my mother said, "Well, she wasn't our family." Grandpa kept the girls for 9 days. 9 days of school pickups and dinner and nighttime routines and packing lunches and finding Lily's specific cup, the pink with the frog on the lid, not the other pink one, and sitting with Mia through her fear of the dark and her questions about where Mommy was and when Mommy was coming home. 9 days of a 71-year-old man bending his arthritic knees to bath time level, reading the same 3 picture books on rotation until he had them memorized. When I was finally well enough to have visitors, he came to the hospital with the girls on day 4. He had combed their hair, their clothes matched. Lily had a small orange juice stain on her shirt that he'd tried to blot out but couldn't quite get. Mia ran to me and held my hand and didn't let it go for the entire hour they were there. Grandpa sat in the chair across the room and let us have that. He didn't make it about himself. He just sat there, this quiet, solid presence, and when I looked over at him, he gave me a small nod. "You're okay. They're okay. Everything held." My parents visited once on day 6 for 45 minutes. My mother brought flowers, grocery store flowers, still in the plastic sleeve, and spent most of the visit telling me about the concert. She said Harry's voice was even better in person. My father watched the news on the muted TV. When they left, my father patted my foot through the blanket and said, "Feel better." I watched them walk out into the hallway, and I did something I had never done before in my life. I did the math. Not a metaphor. I literally lay there and counted. I went back through the last 10 years of my life, and I added up every time I had shown up for them, financially, physically, emotionally, and I added up every time they had shown up for me. The columns were not close. I had spent my adult life operating under the assumption that family was unconditional, that the deficits were temporary, that my parents were just products of their own upbringing, that if I kept showing up, they would eventually, in some crisis, show up back. That love was not something you tallied, but something you trusted. But trust is not the same as willful blindness. And sitting in that hospital bed with a healing spleen and a full accounting of the last decade in my head, I understood something I couldn't unfeel. This relationship had always been transactional. The transaction had just always run in one direction. I didn't cry. I didn't make any decisions in anger. I just lay there, very still, and let the understanding settle into me like something coming to rest after a long fall. The next morning, when my mother called to ask if I needed anything, I said, "No, I'm fine, thank you." And I meant it differently than I ever had before. Because what I was fine with was done being negotiated. I didn't say anything else. Not yet. I had learned from 34 years of evidence that this family responded to emotion the way they responded to everything uncomfortable, by rewriting it. If I came at them with feelings, they would have a story ready within the hour. So I decided I wouldn't give them feelings. I would give them facts. And first, I needed to collect them. I was home for 2 weeks before my mother started telling people I'd had a breakdown. Not a physical one, an emotional one. She was careful about it. She didn't say it to my face. She said it to her friends, to my aunt, to the neighbor she'd known for 20 years. The word she used, the specific word which got back to me through 3 separate people, was unraveling. She told them I'd been unraveling for years and that the accident had just finally pushed her over the edge. She told my aunt that I had cut off the family, which was a creative interpretation of the fact that I had stopped calling twice a week and had declined Sunday dinner twice. She told my cousin Brianna, who told her husband, who works with someone Daniel knows, that I had never been grateful, that everything they'd given me over the years had never been enough, that I had always had a chip on my shoulder and they had done their best. Rachel amplified it quietly. She didn't say anything overt. She's smarter than that. She just liked the right comments on a Facebook post my mother made about the importance of family loyalty in hard times. She forwarded a group text about a family gathering without copying me, then claimed it was an accident when Daniel mentioned it. The architecture of it was almost elegant. By the time they were done, they had constructed a version of events in which I was the problem, always had been, and the hospital incident was just more proof of a pattern of dysfunction that originated with me. The part that almost worked was how familiar it felt. This is what gaslighting looks like when you've grown up marinated in it. It doesn't feel outrageous. It feels like coming home. You hear their version and some part of you goes quiet because you've spent your whole life being told that your perception of reality was the unreliable variable. But I was collecting facts now. I had texts saved. I had call logs. I had Rachel's Instagram stories timestamped against my surgery window. I had the voice message my mother left me 3 days after the accident, when she'd had a few glasses of wine at book club, saying she hoped I knew that some people don't get to have a support system because they burn every bridge they cross. I had the email my father sent Daniel, man to man, suggesting that my emotional volatility had been a strain on the marriage for years and asking if he was okay. I saved everything in a folder. I did not name the folder anything dramatic. I named it 2024 Files, and I put it on a drive only I had access to. I was not angry. I want to be precise about that. What I felt was closer to the thing you feel when you've been holding a door open for a long time and you finally, quietly, let it close. I went back to work. I got the girls to their appointments. I stopped initiating contact with my parents, not with a speech, not with an ultimatum, just stopped. Some weeks went by, then more. They noticed, and they pushed harder. What they didn't know was that pushing was exactly what I needed them to do. Her name was Dr. Carla Osei, and she was my discharge follow-up physician, a woman in her mid-50s who had the particular manner of someone who has seen enough to no longer waste words. I mentioned my family situation once clinically in the context of my recovery support system. I said my parents had been unavailable during the surgery and that my grandfather had stepped in. I said it the way you'd report a fact on a form. She looked at me for a moment and asked, "Was that typical of them?" I said, "Yes." She wrote something in her notes and then said, "I want to refer you to someone, not because there's anything wrong with you, because what you're describing is a specific kind of chronic stress that presents physically in ways most people don't connect." The someone was a therapist named Marcus Webb, and within 3 sessions, he had identified something so cleanly that I actually laughed. Not a funny laugh, the other kind. The golden child dynamic you're describing, he said in our second session, is well documented. The parentified child, which is what you were, develops hypervigilance around others' emotional needs as a survival mechanism. The difficult part of healing isn't recognizing the dysfunction. It's tolerating the discomfort of withdrawing from a role you've played so long it feels like identity. I asked him, "Is it possible to expose what happened without it, looking like I'm just a bitter daughter trying to burn things down?" He didn't hedge. He said, "The truth doesn't need you to perform it. It only needs you to let it be seen." Around the same time, Grandpa and I had started talking more. Real conversations, not just logistics. He told me things I hadn't known, that my father, his son, had pulled away from him too, years ago, after Grandpa had refused to loan him money for a business venture he thought was foolish. That Grandpa had watched the way my parents treated me at family events for years and had said nothing because he didn't know if it was his place. "I should have spoken sooner," he told me one evening, sitting at his kitchen table while the girls slept down the hall. "I watched them take from you, and I told myself it was complicated." It wasn't complicated. It was just wrong. He pulled out a folder of his own. He'd kept records too, without knowing I had been doing the same thing. 20 years of Christmas cards, birthday calls, the times I'd shown up, the times they hadn't. He'd kept them the way old men from his generation keep things. methodically, because you never know when you'll need to account for yourself. He slid the folder across the table to me. I'm not a young man, he said. I want to see this finished correctly before I'm not here to see anything. I didn't say anything for a while. Then I asked him, are you willing to say what you know? In front of them? He looked at me the way he'd looked at me in the hospital room. That same small nod. Everything held. The occasion was my cousin Brianna's engagement party, hosted at my Aunt Linda's house, my mother's sister, with 40-something people, a catered spread, and the full extended family assembled for the first time since Christmas. My parents had been pushing for reconciliation for weeks. My mother called Daniel directly and said she was worried about me. My father sent me a formal email, and I do mean formal, with paragraph breaks and a subject line explaining that family required grace and the willingness to move past things. They wanted Sunday dinner. They wanted to talk. I said I'd see them at the engagement party. That was the only commitment I made. I brought Grandpa. He wore his good jacket, the charcoal one he saves for weddings and funerals. He walked slowly, but he walked straight. And when we came through Aunt Linda's front door together with Mia holding his hand and Lily riding on my hip, the room arranged itself around that image without knowing why. My mother saw us from across the room. Something moved behind her eyes. Not guilt, not quite. More like a door swinging on a hinge, testing its own weight. The party ran for about an hour before my father made his move. He cornered me near the dining room, drink in hand, slow and controlled, and said, "This coldness you've been showing your mother is not okay. She's been worried sick. You need to stop punishing us for something that was a misunderstanding." "What was the misunderstanding?" I asked. He blinked. "You know what I mean. I'd like to hear you say it." He set his jaw. "You called during an inconvenient time. We didn't know how serious it was. I told you there was internal bleeding. You've called crises before that weren't." Around us, the conversation had gone quieter in the way that conversations do when they sense something structural happening nearby. I said, "I'd like to talk about this together, with Grandpa." My mother materialized at my father's elbow the way she always does when she senses a perimeter being tested. "We're not doing this here," she said. "This is Brianna's party." "Then let's keep it brief," Grandpa said. He hadn't raised his voice. He didn't need to. He was 71 years old, and he had the kind of stillness that comes from having survived more than the people in the room could imagine. When he spoke, the remaining conversation in our section of the room went silent. He looked at my father, his son, and said, "I picked up those girls from daycare. I kept them for 9 days. I was at the hospital when she came out of surgery." He let that sit for a moment. "Where were you?" My father started to speak. Grandpa held up one hand. "Not aggressive. Just wait. I'm not asking what was inconvenient for you. I'm asking where you were when your daughter needed you." He paused. "I know where you were. I saw the pictures." My mother's face did something extraordinary. It went from controlled to calculating to something I'd never seen on her before. Exposed. Nakedly, flatly exposed. "That's private," she said. "You posted it publicly," I said. I took out my phone. Not dramatically, I didn't hold it up like a weapon. I just turned it so she could see her own Instagram stories on my screen. Concert lights, sequins, her face tipped back in the crowd, mid-song, eyes closed, time-stamped. The room was quiet now. All of it. "I also have the call log," I said. "I have the voicemail you left me 3 days later. I have the email Dad sent Daniel." I looked at my father. "The one about my emotional volatility," Rachel said, from somewhere to my left. "This is insane. You're doing this at a party?" Grandpa looked at her. Quietly, she didn't choose the party. She chose to come when she was invited. "Your parents chose to confront her here." He reached into the inside pocket of his charcoal jacket and set a folded piece of paper on the buffet table beside him. He didn't open it or explain it. He just let it sit there. 22 years of notes, he said, of what I watched. Every time she showed up. Every time you didn't. I'm old enough to know that silence looks like complicity from the outside, and I'm done being complicit. My mother said his name, quietly, like a warning. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he turned back to me, and the party, all 40-something people of it, was so still I could hear the catering trays cooling. "I'm proud of you," he said. I should have said it sooner. The engagement party ended 40 minutes early. Brianna was gracious about it, which I will always be grateful for. She found me in the hallway as people were leaving and hugged me without saying anything that required a response. Her mother, Aunt Linda, was less gracious. She told my mother in the driveway that she'd always sensed something was off, and that she wouldn't be taking sides, which is what people say when they've already chosen. My parents drove home without speaking to each other, according to the cousin who rode with them for the first 15 minutes of the trip. That cousin texted me 2 days later to ask if I was okay. I said I was. I thanked her. I didn't elaborate. The consequences weren't cinematic. There was no single moment of public destruction, no dramatic scene with witnesses gasping. Real fallout doesn't work that way. It seeps. My mother stopped attending her Wednesday book club. She told someone it was a scheduling conflict, that someone told someone else. The version that circulated was that she was embarrassed. Not heartbroken, not wronged, embarrassed. That distinction matters. Embarrassment is what you feel when the truth has been seen and you know it. My father's brother called him. I don't know what was said, but I know the call lasted less than 4 minutes, and my uncle stopped returning my father's calls after that. Rachel went quiet on social media for almost 3 weeks, which for Rachel was essentially a monastery retreat. When she resurfaced, her posts had shifted in tone, less family content. More solo travel, self-discovery. She was working something out. I didn't reach out to her. That was her work to do, not mine. The email forward network, the cousins, the family friends, my mother's book club rotation had already processed the information by the time the week was out. My parents could feel it. They had built their social world on a particular image of themselves as warm, generous, long-suffering parents of a difficult daughter. That image required consensus. Consensus requires that no one in the room has seen the Instagram stories and the call logs side by side. They sent me 2 letters. Physical letters, handwritten, which surprised me. I think they understood that text could be screenshotted and email forwarded. My father's letter called what I'd done an act of cruelty in front of family. My mother's letter said she had never felt so humiliated and asked what she had done to deserve a daughter like this. I read both letters once. I saved them in the 2024 files folder. I did not respond. There is a particular kind of silence that isn't absence. It's pressure. It's the thing that fills the space where reaction used to be, and it is, if you can hold it long enough, far more effective than anything you could say. Daniel watched all of this with a kind of careful, worried love. He asked me once, about a month out, if I was okay. Not performatively, he actually wanted to know. I told him the truth. I'm not happy about any of it, but I'm not pretending anymore either, and that feels like breathing for the first time in a long time. He was quiet for a second. Then, yeah, I've noticed. The girls were fine. Mia had started drawing pictures of Grandpa to hang on the refrigerator. In one of them, she'd written, in 5-year-old handwriting, "My GPA is the best." Grandpa cried when he saw it. Not loudly. He just went still for a moment and pressed his hand over his mouth. That picture is still on the refrigerator. 6 months later, I don't talk to my parents. There was no formal declaration. No ultimatum, no certified letter, no closing ceremony. I just stopped participating in a relationship that had required me to continually deny the evidence of my own life, and they, without the audience of my compliance, found they didn't know what to do. My mother has called 4 times in the last 3 months. I have let them go to voicemail. 2 of the messages were conciliatory in tone, which surprised me. One was cold. One was a different kind of message. Her voice doing something unfamiliar at the end. Something that sounded like the beginning of an accounting she wasn't ready to finish. I've listened to that one more than once, not to soften me, just to mark the distance between who she was the day she told me to stop being a burden and who she is becoming now that the story she told about us has no one left to believe it. Grandpa had a knee replacement 2 months ago. I drove him to the hospital. I sat in the waiting room with Mia's drawings in my bag and a coffee I didn't drink, and I did not feel afraid the way I would have felt afraid if I were still the version of myself who needed to perform strength. I just waited. He came through fine. The surgeon said he was remarkably strong for his age. Of course he is. Marcus, my therapist, says that what I'm in now is the part people don't make movies about. The part after the confrontation where nothing is resolved but everything is different. Where you're not healed but you're honest, and honest is the thing healing grows from. He says I'm doing well. I believe him most days. There are things I still carry that I don't fully know what to do with. The question of Rachel, who reached out to me recently, genuinely, without our parents framing in the room, and who seemed, for the first time, to be seeing clearly. We're not close. But we're talking cautiously the way you talk to someone you share a language with, but were never taught to use together. The question of my father, who is 63 and has never once in my memory said the words, "I was wrong." I don't know if I would believe him if he did, but I have stopped waiting for it, and the space that frees up is startling. The question of what I want now, not what I wanted from them, but what I want for my life when it's not organized around filling a role nobody chose for me. Here's what I know. My daughters will not grow up watching me disappear into a family that requires it. They will know what it looks like when someone shows up. They will know what it looks like when someone doesn't. And they will know the difference between love and the performance of love, because I will have lived it in front of them. The picture of Grandpa stays on the refrigerator. Every day when I make breakfast, I see Mia's handwriting. My GPA is the best. It's not a happy ending. It's not supposed to be. What happened was real, and real things leave marks. And some of those marks don't fade. But I am not the woman lying on that gurney, watching her mother's name go dark on a phone screen. I am not what they said I was. I never was. And now, finally, quietly, I know it. If you watch this entire story, thank you. You know that this channel doesn't dress things up or hand you a bow. If any part of this felt familiar, drop a comment below. Just one word if that's all you have. I read every single one. And if you haven't subscribed yet, stick around. There are more stories here. More truths that deserve to be heard, whispered wrongs, every week.